Imagine cutting your annual food bill in half with gardening secrets your ancestors knew, but modern industry made you forget. In 2024, the average British family spent over £5,000 a year on groceries. Yet, your granddad fed a family of 6 from a plot the size of a parking space and never once set foot in a supermarket. His trick: he broke every modern gardening rule there is. Number 18 on this list is technically against council regulations in parts of London, but it produces more food per square metre than anything the Royal Horticultural Society recommends. And number 7 was so effective during the war that the Ministry of Food printed leaflets about it, then quietly buried them when supermarkets needed you to keep buying. These 25 ingenious tricks were used by millions of ordinary British gardeners. Some were forgotten, some were actively discouraged, and some were quietly made difficult by an industry that would rather sell you compost in bags than teach you to make your own. These are the 25 smartest garden tricks that vanished from British back gardens. Number 25, Stinging Nettle Fertilizer. Your grandmother didn't buy plant food, she made it from weeds that local councils often urged people to eradicate. Stinging nettles, pulled with thick gloves from the back fence, were stuffed into a bucket and covered with rainwater. After 2 weeks of fermenting in a quiet corner of the garden, the liquid turned a dark brown and emitted a truly pungent odor. Diluted 1 part nettle tea to 10 parts water, it created a nitrogen-rich feed that made tomato plants flourish with remarkable vigor. The smell was so strong that neighbors complained. In the 1990s, some local councils even received formal complaints about the smell, prompting them to send letters requesting residents to cease the practice. But here's the science: researchers at the University of Coventry tested nettle fertilizer against commercial brands in 2019 and found it delivered comparable nitrogen levels for leafy greens. While a bottle of commercial plant food might cost around £6, a bucket of nettles cost absolutely nothing. The nettles were already there, and you were likely pulling them out anyway. Your grandmother simply had the foresight to utilize them before discarding them. Essentially, we discarded free, effective fertilizer because we were persuaded by garden centers to purchase bottled alternatives. Number 24, Growing Potatoes in Old Tires. Every allotment in Britain once featured a stack of old tires in its corner, and these were certainly not for decoration. Your granddad would lay a tire flat on the soil, fill it with compost, and plant 3 seed potatoes. As the shoots grew to about 15 centimeters tall, he would stack another tire on top, fill it, and then another. By midsummer, he had a tower 4 tires high. Come September, when he tipped it over, potatoes would tumble out like coins from a slot machine. A single stack could yield 6 to 5 kilograms of potatoes in less than 0.2 square meters of ground. Garages gave away old tires for free, so the cost was negligible. However, the Environment Agency later began classifying tires as controlled waste, leading councils to ban them from allotments. Garden magazines issued warnings about chemicals leaching into the soil, despite studies from the University of Reading finding minimal risk at the levels typically used by home gardeners. The true issue was that these tire towers worked incredibly well and cost nothing. It's difficult to sell a product that replaces something already freely available. Today, garden centers offer plastic potato planters for £15 to £20 that perform the exact same function, often in colors designed to match your patio furniture. Number 23, Saving Your Own Seed. Before garden centers existed, every gardener saved seeds. It wasn't a hobby, it was simply how gardening worked. Your grandmother would let 1 or 2 runner bean plants go to seed at the end of summer, dry the pods on the kitchen windowsill, and store the seeds in old envelopes labeled with a pencil. The next spring, free beans. She did the same with tomatoes, peas, lettuce, and marigolds. Entire allotment communities thrived on swapped seeds. A packet of runner bean seeds costs around £3.50 today. Your grandmother got hers for nothing, year after year, from plants that had already adapted to her exact soil and climate. Modern seed companies often sell F1 hybrids, which produce beautiful crops but whose seeds will not grow true the following year. This necessitates buying fresh seeds every spring, a deliberate business model, not a mere coincidence. The Heritage Seed Library, run by Garden Organic, actively works to preserve old, open-pollinated varieties precisely because these are the ones from which you can save seeds. Yet, most gardeners remain unaware of this distinction. They buy, they plant, they discard the spent plants, and then they buy again in March. Your grandmother would have considered such a cycle sheer madness. Number 22, Companion Planting with Marigolds. Your granddad planted French marigolds between his tomatoes and cabbages, and everyone assumed it was for decoration. It wasn't. The marigolds released a chemical from their roots called alpha-terthionyl that killed root knot nematodes in the soil. Above ground, their strong scent confused whitefly and aphids, sending them elsewhere. A border of marigolds around a cabbage patch significantly reduced caterpillar damage because the bright flowers attracted hoverflies, whose larvae devoured aphids by the hundreds. A study published in the Journal of Applied Ecology confirmed what allotment gardeners had intuitively known since the 1940s: companion planting with marigolds significantly reduced pest damage on brassicas. A packet of marigold seeds cost about 6 pence in 1960. Today, it's still typically under £2. Yet, the pesticide industry grew into a multi-billion-pound market by convincing gardeners that chemicals were the only reliable answer. Your granddad didn't need chemicals, he needed marigolds and a bit of common sense. Number 21, Toilet roll tubes as seed starters. Every bathroom in Britain produced free, biodegradable seed pots, a secret that no garden center wanted you to discover. Your mom would save the cardboard tubes from toilet rolls, stand them upright in a seed tray, fill them with compost, and sow one seed per tube. When the seedlings were ready, she planted the entire tube directly into the ground. The cardboard would break down in the soil within weeks, ensuring no root disturbance, no transplant shock, and no plastic pots to wash and store. This method was particularly brilliant for deep-rooted vegetables like sweet corn and parsnips, which strongly dislike having their roots disturbed. A set of biodegradable pots from a garden center might cost around £5 for 24. Your mom, however, created 50 from materials most people discarded in the recycling bin without a second thought. Number 20, the Three Sisters Planting Method. This technique originated across the Atlantic but was adopted on British allotments in the 1940s and worked beautifully in our climate with the right varieties. Plant sweet corn in the center, sow climbing beans around the base, and let squash sprawl across the ground between them. The sweet corn provided a natural trellis for the beans to climb. The beans, in turn, fixed nitrogen into the soil, feeding the corn. The squash leaves shaded the ground, suppressing weeds and retaining moisture. This yielded 3 crops in the space normally given to one, all mutually benefiting each other. A single raised bed, approximately 1.2 meters by 2.4 meters, could produce enough sweet corn, beans, and squash to feed a family for weeks. While Dig for Victory pamphlets mentioned intercropping, they never explicitly used the Three Sisters name. Allotment holders who tried it swore by the results. Modern gardening advice often tells you to give each crop its own row with bare soil between, which wastes space, encourages weeds, and dries the soil out faster. The Three Sisters method breaks all those rules and produces more food per square meter than any modern spacing guide recommends. Number 19, burying kitchen scraps directly. Before compost bins became something you bought from the council for £15, your granddad just buried his kitchen scraps straight in the garden. Potato peelings, tea leaves, eggshells, cabbage stalks, he would dig a trench about 30 centimeters deep between his rows of runner beans, dump a week's worth of scraps in, and cover them back up. The worms came, the scraps broke down, and the soil around his beans turned dark, rich, and crumbly within a season. He called it trench composting, though he probably never used the actual term. He just called it common sense. Modern advice says you must have a proper compost bin, turn it regularly, monitor the temperature, and balance your greens and browns. Your granddad skipped all of that and got the same result with a spade in 10 minutes on a Sunday. Some allotment committees have banned this practice, citing concerns about attracting rats. Fair enough if you are burying cooked meat, but vegetable peelings buried 30 centimeters deep do not attract rats, they attract earthworms. And earthworms are the best thing that can happen to your soil. Here's where the story gets fascinating: the Anderson Shelter Garden. During the war, millions of families had Anderson shelters sunk into their back gardens, corrugated steel arches buried under mounds of earth. The government told people to grow vegetables on top of them, and they did. That 45 centimeters of piled soil, warmed from below by the shelter's trapped air, created a raised bed microclimate that extended the growing season by weeks. Marrows, cabbages, and potatoes thrived on top of Anderson shelters across Britain. The earth mound was essentially a giant raised bed with built-in insulation. After the war, the shelters were removed, but the principle lived on. Gardeners who had grown food on those mounds understood something modern gardeners are only just rediscovering: raised beds with thermal mass underneath produce earlier harvests and later ones, too. Today, we pay hundreds of pounds for raised bed kits. The Anderson shelter gardeners received theirs for free, courtesy of the Luftwaffe. Number 17, Gray Water on the Garden. Your grandmother watered her garden with washing up water and thought nothing of it. The basin went out the back door and onto the runner beans every evening after tea. Bath water got bucketed onto the flower beds. Rinse water from the laundry went onto the lawn. In the dry summers of 1976 and 1959, when hosepipe bans hit and standpipes appeared on street corners, gray water kept entire allotments alive. A household produces around 100 liters of reusable gray water every single day. That's enough to keep a small vegetable garden going through the driest July without touching the main supply. Today, water companies charge around £4 per cubic meter. Some councils actively discourage gray water use, citing concerns about phosphates from detergent, but biodegradable washing up liquid solves that problem entirely. Your grandmother didn't worry about phosphate runoff, she worried about her tomatoes wilting. Different priorities, same common sense. Number 16, Growing Food in the Front Garden. In the 1940s, the front lawn was dug up for victory. Rows of cabbages and carrots replaced the rose bushes, and nobody batted an eyelid. By the 1970s, front garden food growing had become almost taboo. Neighbors complained. Some councils issued warnings about untidy gardens. In 2011, a woman in Todmorden was threatened with enforcement action for growing vegetables in her front garden, though the council eventually backed down after public outcry. Yet, front gardens receive more sunlight than back gardens in most British terraced houses. That south-facing strip between your front door and the pavement could grow enough salad leaves, herbs, and climbing beans to supply your kitchen from May to October. The incredible edible movement, which started in Todmorden, has been proving this for over 15 years, yet the stigma remains. A front lawn is respectable. A front garden full of carrots is eccentric. Your great-grandmother would find that baffling. She grew food wherever the sun hit. Respectability didn't fill stomachs. Number 15, Rhubarb Forcing with a Dustbin. Every allotment used to have an upturned dustbin or a tall chimney pot sitting over the rhubarb crown in January. The darkness forced the rhubarb to grow tall and pale, reaching desperately for light that never came. The result was tender, sweet, bright pink stems that bore no resemblance to the tough green stalks you get from an unforced plant. Forced rhubarb was ready by February, weeks before anything else in the garden, providing fresh fruit when the cupboards were bare. The Yorkshire rhubarb triangle, between Leeds, Bradford, and Wakefield, built an entire industry around this technique, growing forced rhubarb in heated sheds by candlelight. A proper terracotta forcing jar costs £30 to £40 at a garden centre today. Your granddad used a bin he found in a skip. Same result, no cost. The technique is centuries old and it works because rhubarb stores energy in its roots over winter. Deny it light, and it burns through that energy, producing stems so tender they practically melt when stewed. This is not a hack, it is horticultural science dressed in a dustbin. Number 14, using soot as fertilizer and pest control. When every house had a coal fire, soot was abundant and free. Your granddad would collect chimney soot, store it in a dry sack for 3 months to allow the sulfur compounds to mellow, then scatter it around his onions, carrots, and brassicas. The soot served triple duty. It darkened the soil, helping it absorb more heat in early spring. It deterred carrot fly, which hated the smell, and it provided trace minerals, including potassium and nitrogen, that fed the plants. A ring of soot around cabbage stems stopped slugs dead, the gritty texture shredded their undersides. Royal Horticultural Society journals from the 1930s recommended soot as a standard garden amendment. When central heating replaced coal fires in the 1960s and 70s, the soot supply dried up. Gardeners replaced it with commercial slug pellets containing metallaldehyde, which we now know poisons hedgehogs, birds, and dogs. Metallaldehyde slug pellets were banned in Britain in 2022. Your granddad's soot would never have caused that problem. Now, here is a trick that would genuinely get you in trouble today: the Wartime Pig Club. During the war, neighbors formed pig clubs. Groups of families would collectively keep a pig in someone's back garden, feeding it entirely on kitchen scraps and vegetable waste. When the pig was slaughtered, the meat was divided among the members. By 1943, there were nearly 7,000 registered pig clubs in Britain, producing thousands of metric tons of pork outside the rationing system. The pigs ate what would otherwise have gone to waste. The manure went on the allotments. The allotments grew food that fed the families and produced scraps that fed the pig. It was a closed loop that would make modern sustainability consultants weep with admiration. Today, keeping a pig in your back garden requires planning permission, environmental health approval, and a county parish holding number. The regulations exist for good reason. But the principle of turning kitchen waste into protein and fertilizer was the most efficient food production system a suburban garden has ever seen. We replaced it with wheelie bins and landfill. Number 12, succession sowing every fortnight. Your grandmother didn't plant all her lettuce at once, only to end up with 30 heads ready on the same Tuesday in July. Instead, she sowed a short row every 2 weeks from March to August. This meant fresh lettuce from May right through to October. She did the same with radishes, spring onions, and salad leaves, a tiny row every fortnight. Never a glut, never a gap. Modern gardening books explain succession sowing as though it is an advanced technique. It is not. It is common sense that every allotment holder practiced instinctively 50 years ago. They didn't have freezers to store the surplus or cars to drive it to friends. If it wasn't eaten fresh, it was wasted. So, they timed their sowing to match their eating. A single packet of lettuce seeds, sown in succession, could keep a family in salad for 6 months. The same packet sown all at once gives you 2 weeks of lettuce and then nothing. Timing was the trick. Not technology, not money, just a pencil, an envelope, and a calendar on the kitchen wall. Number 11, Epsom salt for tomatoes. A tablespoon of Epsom salt dissolved in 4.5 liters of water and applied to tomato plants every fortnight was gospel on British allotments for decades. The magnesium sulfate addressed a common deficiency in British soils that caused yellowing leaves and poor fruit set. Tomatoes are hungry plants, they strip magnesium from the soil faster than most vegetables. Your granddad spotted the yellowing between the leaf veins, reached for the Epsom salt from the bathroom cabinet, and fixed the problem for about £3. A specialist tomato feed from the garden center costs £8 to £10 and contains, among other things, magnesium sulfate. You can buy a kilogram of Epsom salt from a chemist for under £2. Same active ingredient, different packaging, different price, different profit margin. Nobody in the gardening industry has any interest in telling you that a bath product fixes tomato blight symptoms. Number 10, windowsill propagation from supermarket herbs. This one is beautifully subversive. Buy a living pot of basil, mint, or coriander from a supermarket for £1. Take cuttings, root them in water on your kitchen windowsill, then plant them out. One pot of supermarket basil can produce 15 to 20 new plants if you take cuttings from every stem. Those living herb pots are designed to die within a week because they are overcrowded, overwatered, and grown under artificial light. The supermarket expects you to buy another one next week. But if you separate the seedlings, repot them individually, and give them proper light, each one becomes a productive plant that lasts all summer. Mint is even easier. A single cutting in a glass of water will root within 5 days and grow into a plant that tries to take over your entire garden. Your grandmother knew that any plant that roots in water is essentially free. The garden center would prefer you did not figure that out. Number 9, the cold frame from old windows. Every council tip used to have a pile of old window frames, and your granddad took them home. 4 pieces of wood for the sides, an old window on top at an angle, and you had a cold frame that extended your growing season by 2 months at either end. Seedlings went in during February. Salads grew through November. That glass box trapped heat during the day and released it slowly at night, creating a microclimate 3 to 5 degrees Celsius warmer than the open air. A proper cold frame from a garden catalog costs £70 to £100. Your granddad built one from skip finds and spent nothing. The principle is identical: glass traps solar radiation, warm air rises and is held by the frame, and the angle sheds rain and maximizes light exposure. Double glazing units that fail and go misty are thrown away by the thousand every year. Each one is a free cold frame lid waiting to happen. Your granddad would have had 3 of them by now. Number 8, liquid feed from comfrey. Comfrey was the allotment gardener's secret weapon, and it grew like an absolute thug. Once established, your granddad would plant Russian comfrey, the sterile variety called Bocking 14, in a corner of the plot and harvest the leaves 4 or 5 times a year. Those leaves went into a bucket with a brick on top and no water. Over 2 weeks, they decomposed into a thick, black, foul-smelling liquid that was essentially free, potassium-rich tomato feed. Diluted 20 to 1 with water, comfrey tea produced bigger tomatoes, more peppers, and heavier squash than any commercial feed tested alongside it. The Royal Horticultural Society acknowledges comfrey as one of the most effective natural fertilizers available. Yet, it barely features in modern gardening advice because you cannot sell a plant that produces free fertilizer forever. You plant it once and never buy tomato feed again. That is terrible for business and brilliant for your garden. Number 7, newspaper mulching. Your grandmother laid sheets of wet newspaper between her vegetable rows and thought nothing of it. The paper suppressed weeds completely, held moisture in the soil, and broke down into the earth by the end of the season, adding organic matter as it went. She would lay it 4 or 5 sheets thick, wet it down with the watering can, and cover it with a thin layer of grass clippings to stop it blowing away. No weeding for the entire summer. The Dig for Victory campaign recommended newspaper mulching because it worked and cost nothing. Every household had newspaper. By the 1980s, garden centers were selling landscape fabric and plastic mulch membrane at £4 to £6 per meter. These products do the same job as newspaper, but do not break down, they sit in landfill forever. Your grandmother's method was free, biodegradable, and fed the soil as it decomposed. We replaced it with something worse and paid for the privilege. Here is one that genuinely ruffled feathers: the edible hedge. Instead of privet or laurel, some post-war gardeners planted edible hedges, gooseberry bushes along the boundary, blackcurrant between the gooseberries, a few crab apple trees at the corners. The hedge provided privacy, wind shelter, and 22.7 kilograms of fruit every summer. Some allotment societies encouraged it. Some councils objected, calling fruit hedges untidy. In parts of suburban Britain, restrictive covenants on new housing estates specifically banned fruit trees in front gardens. The reasoning was aesthetic: a privet hedge looks neat. A gooseberry hedge looks productive, and productivity apparently lowers property values. Your great-grandmother would find that logic extraordinary. She planted food wherever there was soil and sunlight. The idea that a hedge should be decorative rather than useful would have struck her as the worst kind of waste. Number 5. Egg cartons as seed trays. Cardboard egg cartons filled with compost and sown with seed served as perfect biodegradable seed trays for decades. Each compartment held one seed. When the seedlings were ready, you tore the carton apart and planted each section directly into the ground. The cardboard broke down in weeks. No plastic, no waste, no cost. A stack of egg cartons from a month's breakfasts gave you enough seed trays for the entire spring sowing. Plastic seed trays from a garden center cost £3 to £5 and crack after 2 seasons. Your grandmother's egg cartons were free and worked perfectly every single time. Number 4. Vertical growing on fences and walls. Your grandmother grew climbing beans, nasturtiums, and even cucumbers up every vertical surface she could find: the back fence, the side of the shed, a piece of old netting strung between 2 poles. She understood that vertical space was free growing space that most gardeners ignored completely. A 1.8-meter fence panel can support a row of runner beans that produces 4.5 to 6.8 kilograms of beans throughout the summer. That's 4.5 kilograms worth of beans from a surface that was previously doing nothing but keeping the neighbor's cat out. Modern gardening media treats vertical growing as a trendy innovation. It is not. Every Victorian terraced garden with a south-facing wall had something climbing up it. Your grandmother knew that sunlight hits walls as well as soil. She just had the sense to use both. Number 3. Coffee ground soil amendment. Every cafe in Britain throws away kilograms of used coffee grounds every day, and your local allotment could use every gram. Worked into the soil around acid-loving plants like blueberries, azaleas, and rhododendrons, spent coffee grounds lower pH and add organic matter. Scattered around brassicas, they deter slugs with their gritty texture and caffeine content. Mixed into compost, they accelerate decomposition by feeding the bacteria that break down organic matter. A study at the University of Melbourne found that coffee grounds improved soil structure and water retention when composted properly. Your local Costa or independent cafe will give you a sack for free if you ask. They are paying to have it taken away as waste. You would be doing them a favor. Yet, the gardening industry would rather sell you bags of ericaceous compost at £6 each than tell you the answer is sitting in a bin behind the high street. Number 2. Saving and replanting supermarket potatoes. This one drives the seed potato industry mad. Buy a bag of potatoes from Aldi for 60 pence. Let a few sprout in the cupboard. Plant them. Harvest new potatoes 12 weeks later. Certified seed potatoes cost around £3.50 for 10 tubers. A bag of eating potatoes from the supermarket gives you a dozen seed potatoes for a fraction of the price. The official advice says never plant supermarket potatoes because they might carry blight or viruses. And that is a legitimate concern for commercial farmers growing acres of crop. But for a back garden with 6 potato plants, the risk is minimal. Allotment gardeners have been planting sprouted supermarket potatoes for decades and getting perfectly good harvests. The seed potato industry has every reason to discourage this. If you realize that the cheapest potatoes in Aldi were also free seed potatoes, you would never buy certified seed again. Number 1. The no-dig method. Charles Dowding did not invent this. Your grandmother was doing it decades before he wrote his first book. She never turned her soil over with a spade. She laid compost on top, let the worms pull it down, and planted straight into the surface. No digging, no backache, no destroying the fungal networks and worm tunnels that made her soil alive. The result was soil so dark and crumbly it looked like chocolate cake. Her plot produced more food with less effort than the bloke 3 plots over who spent every weekend double digging until his back gave out. Science now confirms what she already knew: disturbing soil exposes carbon to the air, destroys beneficial fungi, brings weed seeds to the surface, and disrupts the ecosystem that feeds your plants. No-dig gardening produces comparable or higher yields with a fraction of the labor. It is better for the soil, better for biodiversity, and better for the gardener. Yet, rotavators still sell by the thousand. Spade manufacturers still market double digging as essential. The entire gardening industry was built on the assumption that soil needs to be turned. Your grandmother proved it did not, and the worms agreed with her. Try just one of these techniques this week: the Nettle fertilizer, the succession sowing, or the newspaper mulch. Because these were not just gardening tricks. They were wisdom that garden centers spent decades making us forget. Your grandmother knew. Now you do, too.